They say the devil is in the details, but that's a lie people tell themselves because they're too lazy to read the fine print. The devil isn't in the details, the devil is in the definitions section. Usually around page 4, paragraph 3, subsection B. I'm Elias. I'm a corporate licensing architect. It sounds boring. But in the world of data streaming, I'm the person who makes sure the billion-dollar pipes don't burst. I drafted the code, not the computer code, but the legal code, the DNA of the company. 16 years ago, this company, Nexus Data, wasn't a tech giant in a glass tower in Wilmington. He was a bastard, but he was a smart bastard. Knew that the tech didn't matter if the rights weren't locked down. Elias, he'd say, pointing a callous finger at me, make it bulletproof. I built a fortress of paper. I wove clauses together like a spiderweb made of razor wire. I created the licensing infrastructure that eventually turned that tire shop startup into a $1.2 billion empire for 16 years. I didn't need the magazine covers. I just wanted the machine to work. Quick side note before I get into how the machine tried to eat me. Okay, back to the grime. The problem with building a perfect machine is that eventually people forget it needs a mechanic. They just assume it runs on magic. Probably the first time his heart did anything spontaneous in 80 years, and just like that, the kingdom passed to the prince. Enter Preston. I knew we were in trouble the moment he called his first all-hands meeting. He didn't talk about stability, didn't talk about our core licensing revenue. He talked about disruption. He looked at me, the man in the corner with the sensible glasses and the 3-ring binders, and he didn't see the architect. He saw furniture, he saw legacy cost. You illiterate turnip, that's Gen X, but whatever. I remember a meeting about 3 months into his reign. You pull one thread, the whole sweater unravels. Elias Preston interrupted, spinning a fidget spinner. Yes, a literal fidget spinner in 2024 on the mahogany table. We need to be agile. You need to break things. I lowered my reading glasses. He rolled his eyes, actually rolled them like a teenager asked to take out the trash. That's just legal mumbo-jumbo, Elias. The room went quiet. The other executives, men I'd worked with for a decade, men whose asses I'd saved from a dozen lawsuits, stared at their notebooks. No one said a word. That was the shotgun blast. I didn't say anything. I just closed my binder. My voice was calm. It's always calm. My rage doesn't scream. Preston smirked, thinking he'd won a power struggle. He thought he was housebreaking the old staff. He had no idea he had just walked into the reactor core and turned off the cooling system. He had the title. He had the corner office. He had the signatory pen, but he didn't know where the bodies were buried. I didn't organize for efficiency. I organized for war. I pulled up the original founding documents, the ones with the coffee stains, the ones typed on software that doesn't exist anymore. I knew it was coming. And like Preston are predictable, they're like bad code. And the easiest cost to cut is the quiet department that never makes a fuss. He was going to fire me. I could feel it in the air conditioning. We keep the blueprints, and sometimes we're smart. We draw trapdoors that only we can see. Sorry, old man, I whispered to the photo. Your kid is about to learn why you never fire the person who holds the keys to the castle. Then I waited for the phone to ring. It didn't take long. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Friday risks a weekend PR disaster. Tuesday is bland. Tuesday is safe. It was the HR director, a man named Chloe who looked like she was 12 years old and exclusively shopped at Zara. Her voice had that tremble in it. I'm about to ruin your life, but I'm going to use therapy speak while I do it. I picked up my coffee mug. I took a sip. It was cold. No notebook, no pen, just me in my suit. I walked down the hallway I'd walked down 5,000 times. I passed the server room. They looked at me like I was a ghost. Maybe I was. I walked into the strategy room, so much for transparency. Chloe was there sitting at the head of the table, clutching a manila folder like a shield. Preston was leaning against the window looking out at the parking lot board. A Rolex Daytona. Tacky. Have a seat. If they offer water, they feel guilty. If they don't, they just want you gone. Sat. Chloe blinked. She wasn't ready for the direct approach. She wanted to do the dance. Restructuring, I said flatly. Just say the word. It has fewer syllables. Look, Elias, let's not make this a drama. The industry is shifting. We need cloud-native thinkers. A bottleneck? I repeated. You mean compliance? It's slow, it's boring, and it's expensive. I almost laughed. I physically had to bite the inside of my cheek to stop a cackle from escaping. AI doing my job. I said your role has been eliminated. Killa corrected quickly, sliding a thick packet across the table. Effective immediately, we've prepared a severance package. I looked at the packet. 6 months of pay for 16 years of building the empire. It was an insult. And my equity, I asked. My vesting schedule. Preston waved a hand dismissively. You know the drill. You wrote half the policy, didn't you? He thought that was a burn. I wrote the policy for employees. I didn't write the policy for founders' partners. Preston frowned. I said, standing up. I'll sign the separation agreement, but I need one thing first. We can't give you access to your computer, Chloe said, panicking slightly. I need a hard copy of my original employment contract, one signed by your father in 2008, and a printout of my current personnel record showing my termination date and cause. For my unemployment filing, I lied smoothly. The state requires proof of the original hire date for long-term benefits calculations. It was nonsense. They don't understand it, so they obey it. Fine, Preston sighed. Chloe printed. Chloe scurried out of the room. Preston and I were left alone. The air was thick with unsaid things. He wanted a fight. He wanted me to scream so he could feel justified in calling me emotional. I think you're doing exactly what I expected you to do, I said. We'll be fine, he scoffed. The revenue is on autopilot. Is it? I asked softly. Chloe returned breathless, handing me a thin stack of papers. I placed the papers into my folder. I didn't sign their separation agreement. You need to sign the waiver, Chloe said, pushing a pen toward me. I'll take it home to review, I said. I wrote it, remember? Chloe looked at Preston. Preston shrugged. He's got no leverage. What's he going to do? Sue from boring. I looked Preston in the eye. Goodbye, Preston. Good luck with the pivot. I walked out. I didn't pack a box, didn't say goodbye to the receptionist. It was pounding from adrenaline, because as I clutched that folder to my chest, I knew something they didn't. I knew that in 2008, Old Man Gallagher had been drunk when he signed my original employment offer. A clause that Preston had just triggered, and worse for them, much, much worse, was what I had buried in the master licensing agreement itself. The one Preston just said was on autopilot. He had no idea. I got into my car, a sensible Volvo, and I finally let myself smile. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who just watched the prey walk into the cage and lock the door from the inside. It's a specialized kind of quiet, engineered, insulated, triple-paned. I like it that way. No kids, no wife anymore. I kicked off my heels by the door. I didn't change out of my suit. I needed the armor. Placed the papers Chloe had given me on the table. Then I went to the wall safe behind a generic abstract painting in the hallway. I spun the dial. Inside weren't jewels or cash, just backup hard drives and a heavy fireproof document box. I brought the box to the table. This was the in case of emergency kit, or as I like to call it, the dead man's switch. I pulled out the original master license agreement, MLA, from 2008. The paper was heavy bond stock. Here's the thing about contracts that Preston and his MBA buddies don't understand. You add amendments, you add addendums, you add schedules. Over 16 years, the Nexus Data MLA had grown from a 20-page document to a 400-page behemoth. Every time we entered a new country, every time we added a new data tier, we slapped a patch on the code. I opened the file I'd stolen from the office, the digital backup I'd saved on the USB drive. I pulled up the 2018 Global Expansion Amendment. This was the document that allowed Nexus Data to sell its tech to third-party vendors in Asia and Europe. I compared the digital signature on the 2018 amendment with the signature requirements in the 2008 Master Agreement. And there it was, the ghost in the machine. In 2008, Old Man Gallagher was paranoid about being ousted by a board coup. It was an archaic clause we put in to stop hostile takeovers. We joked about it. We called it the Blood Oath. He signed the amendment digitally from a yacht in the Mediterranean. I signed it digitally from my desk in Wilmington. Everyone was in a rush. I knew it technically violated Clause 14b, but we were all on the same team, right? The company was making money. I was getting my bonus. The 2008 Master Agreement stated that any amendment violating the signature protocol is void ab initio, meaning it doesn't just stop working today. It means it never legally existed. If the 2018 amendment is void, then Nexus Data doesn't have the right to license its tech to anyone outside of the US, which meant every single dollar they had collected from international partners for the last 6 years. I took a sip of wine. It tasted like victory. Preston didn't just fire an employee. I looked at the termination letter Preston had signed. Role eliminated due to redundancy. Redundancy, I whispered, tracing the word with my finger. I went to my home office closet and found 3 pristine navy blue folders. Folder 1, The Truth, contains the 2008 Master Agreement with the wet ink clause highlighted. The 2018 amendment showing only digital signatures. Folder 2, The Crime, contains a print out of Preston's strategic roadmap where he details the new expansion plans that rely entirely on the 2018 amendment being valid. Proof that they are continuing to sell rights they don't have. Folder 3, The Price. One Old Man Gallagher signed when he was drunk. Clause 9, Intellectual Property Retention. In the event of involuntary termination without cause, the employee Elias retains a 1% royalty interest in all licensing structures he personally authored, retroactive to the date of deployment, vesting immediately upon termination. 1% of nothing is nothing, 1% of $1.2 billion. That's not nothing. They owed me back pay on every license sold since 2008, plus the royalty going forward. I sat back. I wasn't going to sue them yet. That's what a normal person would do. A normal person would call a lawyer and file a complaint. I was going to let Preston climb all the way to the top, scream his victory to the world, and then I was going to pull the pin. I needed them to commit one more act. I needed them to publicly rely on the invalid contract one more time with Preston's name on it. Preston Gallagher posted, "Big things coming next week, global expansion like you've never seen." I smiled. He was doing the work for me. Proceed, Preston. 2 weeks. That's how long I waited. For 14 days I was a ghost. I woke up at 6 a.m., did yoga because flexibility is important when you're about to bend a corporation over a barrel. And then I sat at my dining table and monitored the wires. I had Google Alerts set up for Nexus Data, Preston Gallagher, and Vanguard Solutions. It was the deal Preston had been chasing to prove to the shareholders that he wasn't just a nepotism hire. It was a $200 million contract, and it was completely illegal. On a Thursday, the press release dropped. CEO Preston Gallagher calls at the dawn of a borderless data future. I pulled up the article. There was a photo of Preston shaking hands with the Xerox CEO in Berlin. The article was full of quotes about synergy and robust legal frameworks. I almost felt bad for the Vanguard Solutions lawyers. German lawyers are thorough. They assume that when a U.S. company says, "We own the rights," they actually own the rights. They assumed due diligence was done. Assumed Preston knew how to read. My architecture, the one governed by the 2008 Master Agreement. "Gotcha," I whispered. He'd try to bury it. Maybe try to bribe me with a consulting fee. No, I needed to cut off his air supply. I sent it to the general counsel of Vanguard Solutions, a man named Heinrich. I'd met him once at a conference in Geneva. He was a serious man who wore 3-piece suits and had zero sense of humor. "I am writing to you as the original author of the Nexus Data Master License Agreement 2008. I noticed the exciting news about your partnership. As I am no longer with Nexus Data effective 2 weeks ago, I am organizing my personal records. My records indicate that without these specific signatures, the amendment is technically void ab initio, which would unfortunately render any subliasencing of the IP to Euro unauthorized under U.S. law. I'm sure it's just a paperwork oversight on Streamline's end. Given the strict liability laws in the EU regarding IP theft, I thought a friend should let you know." It was the most passive-aggressive paragraph I had ever written. It was beautiful. It wasn't a threat. I poured a fresh cup of coffee and watched the clock. It was 2 p.m. in Delaware. Klaus was probably at dinner. He'd check his email on his phone. He'd read it. They would pull the contract. They would look at Clause 14. B. I gave it 3 hours. At 5:15 p.m. my phone rang. It wasn't Klaus. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later it rang again. Preston's cell number. "Elias, pick up the phone. What the F did you send to Germany? We need to talk now." Then I replied, "I'm sorry, who is this? I don't have this number saved. My employment ended 2 weeks ago. Stop playing games. Klaus just put a hold on the wire transfer. He's talking about fraudulent inducement." I smiled. I could hear his panic through the LTE network. The $200 million wire transfer was frozen. I can't speak on behalf of the company. "Preston, I'm not an employee. I'm just a confused bystander." He didn't text back immediately. He was probably throwing his phone across the room. 10 minutes later, an email arrived. Oliver was a decent guy, but weak. He did what Preston told him. Subject: urgent legal consultation and settlement discussion. We believe there has been a misunderstanding regarding the validity of the 2018 amendment. We are prepared to discuss a retroactive consulting arrangement to clarify these terms. Please confirm your attendance. I didn't reply immediately. I went to my closet. I pushed aside the sweatpants and the yoga gear. I hadn't worn it in 5 years because it was too intimidating for the casual office culture Preston tried to instill. Tomorrow, I said to the suit, we're going to be intimidating. I replied to Oliver with one word: confirmed. The trap was sprung. The kind of deep restorative sleep you only get when you know you hold the winning lottery ticket and everyone else is holding a losing betting slip. While I slept, I knew what was happening inside Nexus Data HQ. I still had friends there. Low-level analysts, paralegals. The invisible people Bren ignored. They're scrubbing the servers, searching for wet ink documents. Preston is in the boardroom. He looks like he's going to puke. I didn't reply. Plausible deniability is a beautiful thing. I woke up at 6:30 a.m. I put on the Armani suit. It fit perfectly. It felt like chainmail. I drank my coffee black. I gathered the 3 folders. They sat on my kitchen counter, innocent-looking navy blue cardstock. Folder 3, the bill. I put them in my leather briefcase, the one Old Man Gallagher had given me for my 10th anniversary. It was battered, scratched leather. I drove to the office. The commute was surreal. I listened to NPR. They didn't mention that a local tech giant was imploding. Not yet. I pulled into the parking lot. I had to park in the visitor lot half a mile away. Petty, I muttered, locking the Volvo. I walked across the asphalt. From the outside, it looked like a fortress of innovation. From the inside, I knew it was a house of cards held together by a signature that didn't exist. I walked into the lobby. She knew I'd been fired. The rumor mill moves faster than fiber optics. Elias, she stammered. Can you buzz me in? I have to call up, Jess said, reaching for the phone nervously. Go ahead, she whispered into the receiver. She nodded. She turned pale. The fact that they reverted to war room meant the panic was terminal. Thanks, Clara. I walked to the elevators. I stepped in, checked my reflection in the mirrored walls. I looked calm. I looked like a man who was about to audit God. The hallway was quiet, too quiet. Usually this floor was buzzing with assistants and junior VPs trying to look busy. They didn't want witnesses. I walked down the long corridor, my heels clicking on the polished concrete. Click, click, click. Through the glass, I could see them. Preston was pacing. His suit jacket was off. Oliver, the general counsel, was sitting at the table, his head in his hands, surrounded by stacks of paper. 2 external lawyers, hired guns, probably charging $1,000 an hour, were whispering to each other, looking at laptops. They looked up as I approached. It was heavy, but I didn't struggle. Good morning, gentlemen, I said. My voice didn't shake. He turned to me. His eyes were redrimmed. You, he spat. I placed my briefcase on the table, and I didn't sabotage anything. I simply answered a question from a colleague in Germany. Transparency is one of your core values, isn't it, Preston? Transparency, did I? I looked at Oliver. Oliver, tell him. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He's right, Preston. Technically, I care about the money frozen in the bank. Sit down, Preston. I said. I didn't shout. He was so shocked by the command that he actually sat. Now, I said, unlatching my briefcase. You asked me here to clarify terms. I laid them out in a row. You have a problem, I said. A very big, very expensive problem. One of the external lawyers, a sharp-looking guy with a shaved head, spoke up. Miss Vance, we are prepared to offer you a consulting agreement to rectify the signature discrepancy. We can offer you a standard rate of. I held up a hand. It's not. I placed my hand on folder 1. This isn't a consulting gig, I said softly. The air conditioning hummed. Preston stared at me, his mouth slightly open. He finally realized that the librarian had teeth. You're delusional. We have 50 lawyers on retainer. You have what? Open it. Oliver hesitated. He looked at the external lawyers. Oliver opened the navy blue folder. Inside was the single sheet of parchment-colored paper, a certified copy of the 2008 Master License Agreement, specifically page 42, Clause 14b. Read the highlighted section, Oliver, out loud for the class. Clause 14b, sovereignty of IP. Any amendment, addendum, or modification that alters the territorial exclusivity of the licensed technology must be countersigned in wet ink by the founding licensor, Gallagher, and the chief licensing architect. I leaned forward. Void AB initio. Do you know what that means, Preston? Means the 2018 Global Expansion Amendment, the one you used to sign deals in Japan, Brazil, the UK, and now Germany never legally existed. You've been selling rights you don't have for 6 years. That's a technicality, Preston shouted, standing up again. Backdate it. No, you can't, I said calmly, because Old Man Gallagher is dead. He can't sign it and I'm not an employee. The intent of the parties was clear. The company operated as if the amendment was valid. A judge will uphold the doctrine of equitable estoppel. Can the stock price survive a 3-year freeze on international revenue? Preston looked like he'd been punched in the gut. Without the international stream, they were insolvent in 6 months. What do you want? Preston asked. You want your job back, is that it? Fine, you're retired. We'll pretend this never happened. I laughed. It was a genuine laugh. No, Preston, I don't want a job. I slid folder 2 across the table. Every contract signed, every dollar collected, totals approximately $840 million in revenue collected under a void contract. Oliver flipped through the pages. I had transaction IDs, dates, counterparties. If I send this folder to the SEC, I said, it's not just a contract dispute. It's securities fraud. That's jail time. Federal Preston sank into his chair. He looked at the lawyers. It's problematic. If he goes whistleblower, the investigation alone destroys the market cap. Even if we win, we lose. Now, let's talk about how we avoid that. I reached for folder 3. This is the solution, I said. Just say the number 1 million. 2. Oh, Preston, I smiled. I need you to think like an owner because that's what I am. I opened folder 3. I turned the document in folder 3 around so they could read it. Read it. Oliver leaned in. He was sweating profusely now. Jesus Christ, Oliver muttered. What? Preston snapped. Elias retains a royalty interest in all licensing structures he personally authored, retroactive to the date of deployment. So Preston waved a hand. A few grand? It's defined as 1.5% of gross international licensing revenue, Oliver said, his voice trembling. 1.5%. Fine, we'll pay you 1.5% of this month's sales. No, Preston, I corrected him gently. You owe me 1.5% of every dollar this company has made outside of the U.S. for the last 6 years. 5% of every dollar it makes in the future. The room went silent. 1.5% of $840 million, $12.6 million immediately in cash, plus the future value. If the company hit its targets, that 1.5% was worth another $34 million a year forever. That's extortion, Preston whispered. A contract you triggered when you fired me without cause to save a few bucks on my salary. We'll fight it, Preston said, his face turning purple. We'll argue you were fired for cause. You already signed this. Reason for separation, redundancy, role elimination. You put it in rioting. Preston, you can't change the reason now just because the bill is higher than you expected. He has you cold on the termination cause. If we try to change it now, it looks like retaliation. The Department of Labor would eat us alive before we even got to the contract dispute. Then you better find it, I said. Sell the yacht. Sell the summer house in the Hamptons, or explain to the board why you need to dip into the emergency reserves because you didn't read my personnel file. This destroys me, Preston said, looking at me with pure hatred. But if you don't pay it, I send the email to Vanguard Solutions confirming the contract is void. Then you lose the $200 million deal. Then the SEC comes knocking. You go to prison. I leaned back in my chair. So the choice is yours. I have a yoga class at 11. I need an answer before I leave. Preston looked at Oliver. It's the only way to seal the 14B breach. We can structure the settlement to include a waiver where he retroactively validates the signatures. We pay her to fix the mess. I know. I smiled. That's why I added a premium. A premium? That requires a consulting fee. How much? Another $2 million, I said. Preston had stormed out to call the CFO, leaving me alone with the lawyers. This is where the real war happens. People think the war is the shouting match. External lawyer, his name was Donovan, apparently, slid a laptop toward me. We've drafted a preliminary settlement and release agreement. Donovan said it structures the $14. $6 million as a lump sum payment. I didn't just read it, I dissected it. Section 4, I said, pointing at the screen. Employee agrees to a global non-compete for a period of 5 years in the data licensing sector. Delete it. I said, excuse me. Delete it. I'm not an employee anymore. I'm not signing a non-compete. If I want to go work for Vanguard Solutions next week, I will. Donovan frowned. If I don't sign the Vanguard Solutions deal dies today, do you want to be the one to tell him the deal fell through because you got greedy on a non-compete? Donovan hesitated. He deleted the clause. Employee agrees never to speak negatively about Nexus data, its officers, or its operations. That stays, Donovan said firmly. We can't have you trashing the CEO on Twitter. If someone asks why I left, I'm not going to lie. We can language that, Oliver interjected, trying to play peacemaker. Mutual non-disparagement. But I want a clause added. Section 8. What is it? I want a formal written apology from Preston Gallagher signed in wet ink, acknowledging that my termination was an error in judgment and thanking me for my 16 years of service, and I want it framed. He'll never do that. I said for my file. I wasn't doing it for the file. I was doing it because I wanted to hang it in my bathroom. I heard shouting from the hallway. Eventually, Preston came back in. He looked like he had aged 10 years in one morning. You get your money. You get your apology. Just sign the damn retroactive amendment so I can wire the funds to Germany. Money first, I said. I want to see the confirmation number before my pen touches the paper. Can't wire $14 million in an hour, Preston yelled. You can do it in 10 minutes if you want to. Preston glared at the CFO who had just walked in. Do it. I just stared at the abstract art on the wall. It was a painting of a chaotic storm. Fitting. Deposit received $40,600,000. I checked the balance. It was a cheap pen I'd pulled from my purse. I pulled the 2018 amendment, the fresh copy they had just printed toward me. I signed my name. Done, I said, capping the pen. I stood up. I closed my briefcase. The bomb had been defused, but the gold was in my pocket. Pleasure doing business with you, Preston, I said. He didn't look up. I walked down the hall, but I had one last stop to make. I took the elevator down to the lobby. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by a strange, heavy exhaustion. Clara was still there. She looked terrified to make eye contact. It's okay, Clara, she whispered. It went fine, I said. Hey, Clara. Yeah, don't water it, I said. Let it die. The air outside smelled sweet. It smelled like freedom. It smelled like early retirement. I didn't drive home immediately. I drove to a small dive bar about 3 miles away. The Rusty Nut was where Old Man Gallagher used to take us, after we signed a big deal in the early days. It was 11:30 a.m. The place was empty except for the bartender, a guy named Joe who looked like he'd been carved out of granite. Elias. Joe blinked. Not anymore, Joe? I said, climbing onto a stool. I'm retired. I got a severance package. I said, a generous one. Well, congrats. The cheap stuff. Cold. He popped a mini bottle of Korbel. I had deleted my work email account from the app. I deleted the Slack app. I deleted the calendar. He was probably spinning a narrative right now. Tell the board it was a strategic legal settlement to fortify IP positions. He'd use buzzwords. Every time he signed a contract, every time he saw a legal brief, he would flinch. He would wonder if there was another trapdoor, another clause, another Elias waiting in the weeds. And the best part, there was. I had written the script years ago, unless someone manually overwrote it. Well, let's just say the MER data for the entire 2019 to 2023 archive was going to vanish. I could have told him. I took a sip of champagne. To Preston, I toasted to the empty bar. May your pivots always be painful. Keep the change, Joe. I walked out into the sunlight. I had a yoga class to get to. My dignity hadn't just returned. It had been capitalized, vested, and paid out in full.